in your mind, invite the holy being you feel closest to come and join you. Visualize them in the air in front of you. Feel their presence close to you. Good to bow or prostrate to them to honor their purity and wholeness in your mind. You can offer them something you consider to be beautiful or precious in your life. And see them accepting it happily, experiencing great bliss. Ask them for their blessing. You might be an excellent LOJONG practitioner and attain every realization quickly. And you can visualize them or feel them coming to the space above the crown of your head. It's a small glowing holy crown ornament facing forward with you. Blessing the being. Good to feel your presence throughout the day. Check in now and then. Remember that they are there with you. Well, homage to all the holy beings everywhere. Thank you for coming. Doing quizzes at home, I guess?
Yes, but if you have homeworks or anything that you would like to turn in, I will take them.
So, last week we were talking about LOJONG called Freedom from the Four Attachments, right? And we covered the first of those four attachments. Do you remember what it was? Cheating with me, she knows. He said, if you're attached to this life, you know Dharma practitioner, right? So what does it mean to be, what did we talked about, what does it mean to be attached to the things of this life? Should you feel guilty about enjoying a nice latte or espresso or dinner or automobile date? No, right? This is not what the point of this LOJONG is, right? It's what?
Your butt chucks, your...
What did you say?
No, not that, I didn't say that.
Right.
Your feelings, your customs, your... That were the headlines.
They said that attachment to this life is based upon your ethics, right? If you're following ordinary ethics, ordinary ways of being, if what you're doing with your life is living in an ordinary fashion, then you're attached to this life. If we're following the customs of our society, if we're living according to the ethics that our parents taught us or our school teachers taught us, that are the cultural norms and values of our society, then we're attached to this life. Why? Because those things are changeable. They're not karmically correct necessarily. There is an overlap, obviously, where our society and our culture says don't kill people and don't hurt people. Lots of cultures don't have that belief system, right? So a lot of the values of our culture, ethical values of our culture and society are a little changed over decades, right? Centuries. And so the first point here is that if you're not living in accordance with the ethics of karma and emptiness, then you're attached to this life. That's the freedom. that's the first attachment, being attached to the ethical precepts of that we're brought up with. You know, my parents taught me this, and this is what I believe, and I'm going to do it because it's how I grew up, and it's what I'm comfortable with, and what I'm familiar with, and it's my habit, and it's where I change my habits. We all grew up with a belief system, right? We all grew up with habituation, training, school, parents, teachers, church, and the point here is you know, he's saying, you know, he's very stern in saying, you know, if you're attached to this life, you're no Dharma practitioner. If you're attached to the things of this life, you're no Dharma practitioner. So the converse of that is you know, if you're living according to the laws of karma and emptiness, you are a Dharma practitioner. Right? But if you're living according to some other ethical precept, you're not a Dharma practitioner. Right? So most of the ethical precepts we have in our society overlap with the laws of karma, you know, like the justice system and the laws of the court. But there's a percentage that do not. Right? There's 10% or 20% of our ethical concepts which are inconsistent with the laws of karma, and that's more delicate. That's more difficult. You know, we don't think that there's somebody up there keeping track who's going to cast us into a fiery pit. You know, if we cross the line, if we're bad, right? What's good karma? What's bad karma? Good karma is the thing which will cause our future happiness. Bad karma is the thing which will lead to our future suffering, right? And if we're living according to that, then we're not attached to this life. We're living for a higher purpose and a higher value system. According to Buddhism, this world is a mistake, and if we're living in this world, it's a mistake. You know, this world is a result of a mind filled with afflictions. I mean, it might be enlightened being, technic day, perhaps so, probably so. But if you're an ordinary human being, then living in a human realm is basically living in a broken realm. You know, there's some good things, some bad things, a mix of virtue and non-virtue, right? It's not all bad, it's not all good. So, in this realm, we'll lose every good thing we have sooner or later. It's just a question of does it happen before death or at the time of death, right? So our goal as Buddhist practitioners, especially higher Buddhist practitioners, is to change realms before we die. This realm is problematic. You know, there are other realms which are not problematic, which are paradisical realms. And so the goal of a Buddhist practitioner is just to get out of this realm before you die. Right? And so our morality has to be driven by that goal. To not be attached to this life, to be a true Dharma practitioner, to be free of the first of the four attachments means that we are driven by an ethical system which will get us out of this realm and get us out of the suffering life. Okay? And if we're doing that, then we're free from attachment to this life. According, you know, our world, our value system doesn't even talk about those things. Right? I mean, there is no conventional Western system that says, you know, if you live this way and if you have this behavior that you can actually experience another realm. Not part of our standard, right? So we've got to go after the things that will get us out of this realm, the things that will get us out of death, and have to learn it and not be attached to what we knew before. So the point being, if you're attached to what you learned earlier in your life, if you're attached to all the things you learned before, you're simply attached to this life, and you're not attached to getting out of this life. Right? And that's the first of the four attachments. Okay, so we've got to start analyzing, evaluating, and thinking for ourselves. So that was the first part of that. There's a second part to it. We say two,
Sam,
Gom. Learning, contemplation, and meditation. Right? So we have to find a path that works in this lifetime, and all three of these things are necessary. Two means learning, like religious learning or spiritual learning, and it's something that we engage in not because they've got the right costume, not because they've got cool accoutrements and rituals, but because it works. Because the system which is put forth actually works to end suffering. So, you know, we're all going to die if we're ordinary beings. Everyone around us is going to die if they're ordinary beings. And so, you know, we have to do something before before that happens. It's important that we're all very critical. It's easy to have someone get up and say, you should do this, you should do that, you should do the other. Here's a great spiritual idea, here's a great philosophical idea. You have to be extremely critical about analyzing it and evaluating it, which is very dangerous. Because it's your happiness, and it's your life, and it's all your future lives that you're talking about. So, your life is at stake. So, when someone gets up, are they talking about dying? Are they talking about how to put an end to suffering realms? Are they talking about an expedient method to reach paradise, right? In this life before you die. So you have to decide for yourself what's right and wrong. And you have to give up the attachments to all the things that we learned from people who, frankly, didn't know much about these things. Our teachers, our parents, school systems. So, Holy Lama Drapa Gelson saying that even in Buddhism you can't be attached to anything. You have to check it out. Just because someone gets up and he's some high lama, you can't take what they say as truth, and you can't take it for granted. You can't just say, "Oh, yeah, I'll do that." You got to analyze everything. You got to check everything out. So you have to learn things. You have to think about them. You have to meditate on them. So, and meditating on them is going deeper and internalizing them and trying to verify these things oneself through realization on a deeper level, right? And how do you do that? You do it by giving it time. Right? It's not possible to get good at anything or to really master anything without giving it time. It doesn't matter if it's running or dancing or playing an instrument or meditating. You won't become good at it if you don't consider it a discipline. If you don't practice it as you would any other discipline. So to be a serious meditator means to have a serious discipline, just like being a serious dancer or a serious swimmer. If you don't have your daily routine, your daily practice, then you're not serious. And you can't really confirm these things directly. You can listen to what people say, you can reason through them, you can analyze them, but you're missing the third step, which is meditation and some kind of deeper insight, deeper confirmation, right? So. So, in that context, we have to look at our lives, right? I mean, whether you're a business person or a student or anything else, you've got to look at it and say, how many hours a day am I giving to various elements of my life? I mean, in a normal job, as a business person, you say, all right, I'll give you 50 weeks and I'll take 2 for myself. I mean, is it smart to, give someone 96 cents of every dollar and keep 4 cents for yourself? Not a profitable investment strategy, typically. And it's the same thing with meditation and work. We have to decide how we're allocating our time. We have to decide how we're allocating our resources. And the more things we have, and the more busyness we have in the outer world, the less time we have to meditate. Everything that we retain in our mind is taking up space. There's a certain. I mean, if it's your mind, it's your CPU, how full is your CPU? Someone says, what about your car? Or your car plug? What's in your refrigerator? What about your blue blazer or that red pair of shoes or that purse? And you remember everything, right? You know where everything is. You know its status. And a certain percentage of our mind is occupied with acquiring things, inventorying our things, keeping track of our things, and looking after our things, right? And so it's very important to free up that mental capacity to dedicate it to higher things, to spiritual things. So it's actually a very good thing spiritually to have a simpler life and to try to work less to the extent possible, to have fewer things, have fewer expenses, and to focus one's mind more upon lojong and practices like lojong. I mean, what is lojong? Lojong is simply thinking spiritual thoughts all the time. Right? It's kind of simple, it's kind of a fundamental notion, but I think we lose sight of it often, which is that our spiritual practice is just about what we're thinking, basically, all day long. And to the extent we're thinking about our stuff, or our job, or what we want, or what we don't want, we're not doing lojong. We're not thinking about how can I help other people and how can I benefit other people. So, do we go through life consuming and acquiring, or do we go through life and thinking about work and thinking about all the mundanity of life? Or do we go through life thinking, how can I help everyone around me? And they do tend to be mutually exclusive thoughts. One does displace the other. So there's really a commitment here to being a LOJONG practitioner that says, I mainly want to think about other people in my life. I mainly want to think about helping other people in my life. And if I'm not thinking about that, I'm not really practicing LOJONG or whatever it might be, whether it's higher teachings, whatever. So, this is really the point here. The point is don't say you're a Dharma practitioner if your mind is just full of ordinary thoughts. You're really a Dharma practitioner and you're free from the first attachment if your mind is full of spiritual thoughts and you're thinking about benefiting other people and helping other people. Don't go around thinking about all these ordinary things, all this ordinary life. 99.9% of your mental capacity is just mundane processing and say, I'm a great Dharma practitioner, which is not true. So, something like that. So, if we don't break off the attachment to this life and the things of this life, then we will die an ordinary death. If we don't have sufficient learning, contemplation, meditation, we will die an ordinary death. And so that's it. If we don't break our attachment to this ordinary life, ordinary thinking, then we'll just simply die. And if we are practicing well, he goes on to say, look, if you are practicing nicely, and if you are thinking virtuous thoughts, you've got to prioritize that. You got to think about, should I be doing this lower virtue or should I be engaging in this higher virtue? Right? So, if you have initiation, if you're doing Karen practice, and then you have to go on to Zogan practice. You have to always go on to the higher teaching. You can't just stay with lower teachings. You're wasting your time. So every stage in our spiritual career means we've got to bump it up, and we have to move on to higher practices. So some people never enter a spiritual path, and then those people who do enter a spiritual path, they can start out with lower practices, or they can become comfortable with a certain practice and say, well, I'm a Khenrinpa, or I'm a LOJONG practitioner, or I'm a Lamapa, and then they spend their life on that, and they never move on to higher practices, and so that's a waste also. It takes more faith and it takes more courage to move on to higher practices. And as one moves on to higher practices, you run into other unique problems. There isn't time to do everything. I think we've all been to teachings where Lama says, you have this commitment, you have this commitment, you have this commitment. You say, my God, now I have 15 commitments, so what do? I can't do them all. How do I decide which commitment? You leave the lower practices behind and you move on to the higher practices. So, if we want to change our body and mind into enlightened beings' body and mind in this life, then we have to progress through this graduated path, through the long run, into the higher teachings, the creation stage and completion stage, right? So we have to give up the lower, more comfortable practices, which takes courage. Once we get into the virtue business, you have to go for it big time. So the freedom from the first attachment is freeing the mind from being attached to mundane thoughts and being a true LOJONG practitioner, thinking about other people. Right? And then once you're in that business, then going for the big time virtue. So don't be attached to the things that you learned earlier, and don't be attached to lower practices which are more comfortable. Right? So, and it's important to say, you shouldn't go on to higher practices before you're ready, because you'll fail. You don't want to stall out at a comfortable level with a spiritual practice, nor do you want to race ahead, and then all of a sudden it's too hard and you don't understand, and then you drop out, and then you're not on a spiritual path and engaging in any spiritual practice, right? So that's very important. So that finishes the first of the four attachments, freedom from the four attachments. Second one, he says, a person who's still attached to the three worlds has no renunciation. So then we have to talk about what the three worlds mean. Right? So, when he talks about the three worlds, he's talking about three kinds of pain, three kinds of suffering. Right? Standard three. First is outright pain, or pain of pain, obvious pain, something like a backache or a physical illness, right? So there are three lower realms. We don't exhaust three supplements, the three lower realms. The three lower realms are
The hell realm, dust realm, animal realm.
animal realm, the sort of craving spirit, hungry ghost realm, and hell realm. So I just finished saying a little while ago, you've got to be really critical and you've got to really question things and you've got to really analyze things, right? So, Buddhism says, look, there are these three lower realms, three suffering realms, which are worse suffering than the human realm. But you can't see two of them, right? You can't verify two of those, you can verify the animal realm. So, generally people don't want to talk about the hell realms, don't want to hear about the hell realms. Buddhism says there are hot hells and cold hells, very similar to the levels of Dante's Inferno. So, tormented spirits are craving beings. The idea is these are beings that can never be satisfied. They're driven by their karma to crave things, but never be able to fulfill them, never be able to experience the things. So burning thirst, but never able to drink, and burning hunger, but never able to eat. And the karma of it is typically people who are stingy or attached to things, they're attached to food or material possessions, they're not willing to help others. And it's kind of like imagine that magnified a million times, right? Imagine that attitude, or imagine that energy magnified a million times. And so that's the idea of that kind of being. So you have to say, if I need to evaluate this with a critical mind, maybe they exist, maybe they don't exist, right? I've never seen it. So just have to sort of question it, right? So, and if you do accept it, then it's a mistake because somebody else will come up and say, oh, there's a pink elephant around, and accept that just as readily without evaluating it. So very important to check it out. Kendrick, who is Jason Koppa's great disciple, who wrote the book, he said, all the Tibetans I meet believe in future lives. They believe in lower realms. They believe in future lives. And I haven't met one who can explain to me why they exist. They just believe it because that's what their parents told them. That's what their religion told them. That's what their culture told them. It's just like, what good is it? What use is it? You don't want to be like that. You don't want to be that kind of practitioner and that kind of Buddhist. So we can verify animal realm, right? We can see animals, right? So how does one become an animal? What is an animal? What is the process whereby one goes from the human realm to an animal realm? I mean, potentially, and we call it death, right? But it's a shift in perception, right? What's the difference between the animal perception and human perception? Right? I mean, I happen to have a pen. I'll say it, you won't hurt it, but I'll say it anyway, just in case. So this isn't a pen from its own side. For a human, the perception and functionality of this thing is a pen. For an animal, it doesn't have the same perception and functionality. For an animal, it's something to ignore or eat or play with or whatever, but it doesn't function as a pen, it doesn't have the identity of a pen, it doesn't exist as a pen, right? So it isn't. And which is correct? Is it a pen or not a pen? Both and neither. It depends on who's perceiving and who's experiencing it. Kind of being who's perceiving and experiencing it, right? So what does it mean to be a dog or whatever animal? It means that you have the perception of seeing yourself with a certain mind, a certain shaggy fur and number of legs and bum sniffing and all the rest, right? So it's a perceptual event and it is reality. Okay? So how do we go from having one perception to another? How long does it take to go from not having cancer to being told you have cancer? You find out in a minute. Right? How long does it take to go from being alive to being dead? It depends. You get hit by a car, whether your breathing stops. Anywhere from a second to a couple of minutes. Right? So these are all perceptual changes, perceptual shifts. So, so there's a very famous sutra. It's called the Sutra requested by Upali. It's probably the most important quotation in Buddhism, and it's accepted by all Buddhist schools. And I'll read it. Lord Buddha is speaking the sutra, and he says the following. He's speaking to his disciples. He said, "When I taught you of the terrors of the realms of hell, many thousands of those among you were frightened and dismayed. But I tell you now that those people who die and travel to those terrible realms of pain don't even exist at all." So we say, look, I taught you how realms exist. I taught you what they were like. And you freaked out. Right? But now I'm telling you, those people in those hells don't even exist. Then he continues, there's no one to hurt you, no one to cut you with a sword, no one to thrust a spear through your body. Everything that you see happening to you within these realms of terror is only a projection. There are no instruments of pain there. So he's saying, when you go to the hell realms, you get your body chopped up and impaled and down to whatever it gets done to you, right? And it just, FYI, when you go to the way beings exist in the hell realm is that they don't have bodies like we have. The bodies don't die. They just, you get chopped up and you spontaneously regenerate and you're sentient for the entire time. You have some chops an arm off, you're still feeling everything, and just reassembles and you go on like that for a very long time. Okay, you keep feeling in your body, you never stop feeling. So anyway, so then he says, look, everything there is a projection. Okay, there's no instrument of pain, everything there is a projection. So then the verse continues, flowers, blossoms, and a rainbow, pleasing, elegant blooms. Mighty structures crafted of pure gold steal your heart away. But here too no one ever came and stopped to do construction. All of these were also built by the single act of projection. The whole world is but a creation that comes from your projections. Okay? Because there are lower realms, no problem. You're conceiving them and projecting them. Okay? No problem to have lower realms and higher realms because they exist as projections, just as this realm exists as a projection. So, if we said that, look, there's some construction company somewhere who built higher realms, there's some construction company somewhere who built lower realms, it'd be rather silly, right? I mean, like, who hired them out? What equipment did they use and where did they go? It doesn't make any sense, right? And it's just, or the idea that there's someone up in the clouds or in the sky somewhere who's got, this fiery pit that bad boys and girls get thrown into because they misbehave. It doesn't make any sense, really. So, but the Buddha is saying, don't worry about hells, it's a projection, right? So how do you know hells exist? Everything is a projection, right? I mean, how does this exist? This exists as a projection of the concept, and it's real and it's valid. This is really a pet for me. This is really a valid functioning pet for me. It's not a real valid functioning thing for God. This body is a real valid functioning human body for me. Okay? It's not that for another being. Another being, a fly or whatever, would have a completely different perception of this body and what it is and what it does and what its function is, right? So hell exists and it's very real. And the Buddha says the whole world comes from your projection. Everything around us is a projection of our own mind, right? So, I could say this is really a pen. But is it really a pen? No. It doesn't have any identity of its own. It doesn't have any nature of its own. It doesn't have any existence of its own. Okay? Its nature and identity and existence comes into being based upon the mind perceiving it. That's all. Okay? And every realm is that way. Every object is that way. So, as a being, my perception can shift and perceive myself better or worse. You see all day long. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to confirm that our perceptions are constantly shifting for better or for worse. I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel depressed, I feel elated. Right? Now, but what happens if you just continue to go along those spectrums? What if you go much higher on the positive shift of perception? What if you go much lower on the positive shifting perception, right? I mean, obviously it's possible. You have really good days and really bad days, right? So, this is not kind of a radical idea that perception shifts, the nature of our experience shifts, and the nature of reality shifts according to the way our mind fluctuates and our perceptions fluctuate, right? So, ultimately there's no anything, right? Each perception is valid for the being doing the perceiving. Okay? So, how we see this depends on our mind. This cylinder, this basis, this, quantum stuff, whatever you want to call it, how it exists depends upon our mind and the mind that we're perceiving, right? From its own side, it's neither, it's not by nature anything, it's not self-existent anything. So it's blank, and that's the meaning of emptiness. The fact this is a basis of projection is its emptiness. The fact that I am a basis of projection is my emptiness. Right? The fact that my hand is a basis of concept and projection is its emptiness. And the same is true of everything. Everything is empty of any nature. It's of its own. And anything can be perceived as anything based upon the mind doing the perceiving. That's all. Okay? And that's why hell exists, and that's how hell exists, and that's how different realms exist, and that's how animals come into being. How do we transition from being a human to an animal? Our perception shifts. it shifts into our breathing is stopped, or our heart is stopped, or whatever. It doesn't matter, exactly what the discrete series of transitional events are. The point is that new projections arise of being stupid, or being shaggy, or having a different body, or whatever the case might be. And that's called death and rebirth. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it birth, bardo, and rebirth. It's a change in perception, right? So, anyway, so every single thing in the object is the same. It's empty. My hand is empty, my ear is empty, my nose is empty, my eye is empty. Everything depends upon how it's perceived. Is there a choice about how it's perceived? No. It's important to say that perception is enforced upon us, right? No matter how much I say I want to perceive myself as a glowing being in a radiant light, and how much I say I'm going to see myself that way, it just doesn't come to being necessarily, right? So then what? I mean, we have to collect the causes, right? We have to create a mind which perceives in that way. We have to cause our mind to function in a way where it perceives better rather than worse reality, right? So that's our task, right? You can meet a person that you really don't like, and they steal something from you, and you can spend all afternoon saying, "Oh, I really like them, and they didn't steal from me." But it's not true, right? You don't like them, and they did steal from you. These perceptions are forced on us by karma. So, how can we cause our mind to force us to see things as heaven rather than hell? And that's what we're talking about. That's the point of LOJONG. That's the point of these practices, right? So the world around us is the raw material of heaven or hell. The quanta of data or blank screens or whatever you want to call it is the raw material, which is the basis of projecting heaven, hell, human, animal, whatever, according to the nature of the mind. So we're experiencing it as a mix of good and bad right now. That's what the human realm is. That's what makes us human beings, a certain blend of intelligence and positive experiences and negative experiences, right? But when that karma wears out, in the experience of death on our ripeness, then other perceptions arise and force us to see ourselves as a different kind of being, in a different reality, and potentially hell, right? So hell is possible because it's a projection of mind. So this room that we perceive as the sweet little three jewels, if our minds shifted in a particular way, we'd perceive it as a fiery hell rock. If our minds shifted in a different way, we'd be sitting here perceiving this as a holy, permissible room, right? So it isn't the three jewels, bricks and mortar from its own side. It is a basis which is being perceived and projected in a certain way. There is something there. There is a basis, and we take it in and we conceptualize it, and we conceive of it and project it and relate to it and experience it in a particular way based upon our mind and our senses, right? So, going to hell just means your perception shifts. Going to becoming enlightened means your perception shifts, right? To that experience and that reality. So it only takes a minute, to be a healthy guy walking down the street, to have a perception shift to a dead guy, So there's a certain stage in our understanding of emptiness where the level of understanding of ultimate reality is advanced enough that one would never take rebirth in a look in hell. Cannot be born in hell. If you reach that spiritual level, it's impossible. Why? Because your ignorance is no longer strong enough to see things in a way which will result in hell and rebirth. So, Bruce, did you want to ask something?
Yeah. We say that everything that presents itself to us as an apparent phenomenon is only our projection.
You want to say that?
Something like that.
It's something like that.
Something.
Go ahead.
Well, that there is no exterior force or agency that is presenting these phenomena to us independently of our own karmic action. And in the next breath, we say that it's only that projection is a function of mind, but that the mind functions in a way that has been forced upon it. So once again, by implication, we come to some exterior agency acting on the mind, which then acts upon internal and external phenomena, characterizing them as having reality and everything in between. So it kind of mealy mouths its way back and forth between, it's really just me, except for the part that forces me to force the phenomenon, outer and inner, to be thus and such, and not this and that. So, which is it? Is it really me, or is it really not me? And if it's really me, then how can you say that I'm forced to do anything?
So let's say it a different way, because it's very easy to sort of fall into sort of a discrete, mechanistic sort of box-like thinking. There's this box and this box and this box, and they all come together and they bang into each other and something happens, right? So if you talk about, we're talking about karma, right? And the collection of karma, and the ripening karma, and the manifestation of karma, right? So when we talk about karma as being, well, first you have to say karma is the mind stream, right? Karma and the mind stream are synonymous in a way, right? So the premise or the idea or the presentation is that have always existed and will always exist. The mind is streamed on moment to moment, for all time, and will always continue to exist. Right? And so each thought, word, and deed has a residual energy that is a karmic seed. Right? Every time we think a thought, there's a slight residual energy left from that thought, which is what a karmic seed is. And every time we say something, at the tail end of that, as it wears out, there's a residual energy which is imprinted upon the mind and is the karmic seed. Right? And that those karmic seeds, streaming from moment to moment, are the collection of our karma, and they are our mind. Right? They are our mind streams. And so, how these karmic seeds configure and ripen, right, are the expression of our karma and our experience, right, of reality, and of ourselves and our world. Right? So that's it.
In what way then is it considered to be considered forced?
Because I can't say I'm John sitting here, and I would like to pick those 6 karmas and have them ripen right now to get this result. So when you say a karmic experience is forced upon you, it's language. Maybe language is limited, but another way you could say it would be, the countless karmic seeds in my mind stream. Right? Certain of them are ripening, are about to ripen, are ripening, right? And I'm not the one who's consciously picking them. Right? And therefore, I don't have a choice of the matter in the present moment. In that regard, it's not volitional. So to say it's forced on you implies an outside agency, but that's not really the point. The point is I, John, cannot just sit here and say, I like that karma, and that karma, and that karma, and I want them to ripen next.
But if you were an enlightened being or realized being, then you could.
Well, you only have good karmas. They're all pretty much.
Right. But with perfect wisdom, could you not, even if you're not an enlightened being and you still have unripened negative karma, if you have perfect wisdom, could you not then perceive any ripening karma as not negative?
Well, once you're an enlightened being, all of your karmas are pure. And so this is the nature of an enlightened. Once you go along the bodhisattva levels, bodhisattva bhumis, and once you become a pure being, let's just say it this way, okay? We're mixed. We're sort of mixed beings. We don't have such a crappy karma that we're just depressed and wanting to kill ourselves 24 hours a day. I mean, that's the low end of the human realm, right? Someone recently said like they have these suicidal migraines for 20 years, where it's like headache, where you just want to kill yourself like all the time. So there's some pretty heavy suffering in the low end of the human realm, right? I lost my train of thought.
I was trying to understand if
I
you still had negative karma, but you did understand emptiness perfectly, could you not experience it as not negative?
So the spiritual path is about cleaning your negative karma so you no longer have negative perceptions, right? And as one becomes a more advanced, what does it mean to be a more advanced spiritual practitioner? It means you're more virtuous. It means you're engaging in more goodness, right? More love, more compassion, more kindness, more bodhicitta, right? And you're just treating everyone around you and yourself better and better all the time in a loving way, based on wisdom. So, when you start to talk about more advanced spiritual beings, that's what you're talking about. When you're talking about someone who's more saintly, more godly, more virtuous, somebody who's a good person, right? Somebody who's doing goodness all the time in all circumstances. Not only a good person when people treat them nicely, they're a good person when people don't give a shit about them. They're a good person when someone mistreats them, you know? So that's a more saintly person, okay? So when you talk about, you know, advanced spiritual practitioners, they're just better and better and better at that. So once you clean up your act to the point where you're behaving virtuously, lovingly, compassionately, all the time in all circumstances, you're pretty clean, you know? You don't have a lot of negative karmas typically, and you're a fairly advanced spiritual practitioner, and you typically, you know, have pure view and a pure experience of reality and pure perceptions. And at all the way at the end of that spectrum is an enlightened being, which doesn't have any negativity at all of body, speech, and mind. And so at a certain point, you have so much virtue, so much virtuous karma, i.e. your mind stream has such pure energy that everything that the mind is experiencing is lovely and delightful and wonderful, you know, and imbued with wisdom and all the rest. So it doesn't have to be enlightened. It's just like, no matter what they say to me, I feel happy. You know, no matter what they do to me, I feel great. You know.
But before you get to that stage, I'm thinking back to Langri Tengpa. He said, you know, even if someone I hope would help me hurts me for no apparent reason, I mean, I see them as my teacher or a spiritual guide or something. So there it turns like into a sort of new way of seeing things. In other words, the thing you call a pen is suddenly different. You know, it's not a tutor, it's not a pen.
Well, the person abusing you. You know, I mean, is the person abusing you your enemy or your friend or your teacher or neutral?
Well,
could be any of them. Depends on the perceiver, right? So, and that's just part of the Lojong teaching. It's like, look, don't see measure enemy, see measure teacher. Change your perception, change your way of positioning, change your way of thinking. That's a training, you know. But is it valid? Is it a naturally arising thought? You see, if the mind were functioning purely, the thought would naturally, of its own accord, spontaneously arise. I love that person, and you feel it, you know. Something like that. You see what I mean?
But to your point, you make a really good point. I feel like it's right before then that it's like the mind shifts. So if you're not quite at that level yet, where it's all just still on the what you're talking about, seems like step right before it, which is like towards
Thank you. So this is the other point that he's making here. He's saying, don't be attached to the idea that your world won't change. He's talking about freedom from the four attachments, right? Don't be attached to the idea that your world will not change, that you're just going to always be a human, that you're just a human. It's just a perceptual shift, and you're not a human.
Is that the second or the? You know, the first freedom we talked last week. At the moment, we're talking about the freedom of a person who's still attached to the three worlds. Are you talking about the fourth freedom now, or
This is the second.
still
this
the
is
second?
The second kind of attachment. Is attachment to the idea that you're a human and the world's not going to change, and this is your life, and this is your reality. Which is how we go through the world, right? I'm a human being. Pretty much going to always be a human being. Maybe a human being until I die, and I don't know what I'm going to be. Maybe I'll be dust. You know, maybe I'll be a parrot. I don't know. You know. So, you know, he's saying, don't be attached to this idea that you're just a human, and you're just going to be a human, because it isn't true. You're just a perceptual shift away from not being a human, right? So don't fool yourself, right? So, you know, so that's the second kind of attachment. And then how do you stay out of hell? You know, what's the secret to staying out of hell? You keep your vows. You know, you keep your ethics. You're a good person, a good and virtuous person, an ethical person, a loving, compassionate person, right? What's the highest secret of, of Tantra? What's the highest secret of the secret teachings of Buddhism? Stop and check your vows 6 times a day. Stop and check your ethical behavior 6 times a day. Every 2 or 3 hours, you stop and check in and say, am I thinking the right way? Does my mind have the correct content? Do I have pure holy thoughts in my mind? Or not? So that's how you keep your butt out of lower level. And if you keep your vows, it's impossible to have those kinds of suffering perceptions. You just can't. It's not possible. It's not possible to have a mind full of virtue, which is experiencing horrible negativities. You see? It doesn't happen. So can you have a mind full of virtue, which is all of a sudden no longer full of virtue and is full of crappy stuff? Happens all the time. You know? So what is the quality spiritual path? The quality spiritual path is one where you are filling your mind with virtue so regularly and so frequently that it tends to stay. You know? Where you have a lot more virtue resident than non-virtue resident there, right? So you know, where are the three lower realms? Yeah, I mean, in a sense, your mind, right? There was a school of Buddhism that when they read the sutra, they said everything's mind. They named the mind only school. I mean, they were proven to be incorrect, but they took this idea to the logical extension and said, well, yeah, everything's happening in your mind. There's nothing outside of your mind.
So if we were never told about the three lower realms and never been taught about it, would it not exist for us? In the sense that a pen does not exist as a writing instrument to a dog who uses it as a chew toy.
So when you were a child, and you didn't have any concepts, and someone came along and taught you, this is a spoon, you're Johnny, right? I wasn't Johnny until they told me I was Johnny, you know, that I was Johnny, right? And, you know, that wasn't a spoon until somebody told me it was a spoon, but it did happen.
By someone imputing that.
Well, my mind processed information in a way to hear certain sounds and see certain shapes and colors as I'm Johnny and that's a spoon. Right? Now, did it come from the person who was outside me saying, you're Johnny, this is a spoon, or did it come from my mind processing certain sounds and shapes and colors in a certain way? So I ask you, is it a function of the mind and how the mind processes, or is it a function of something outside happening and saying, this is burning fire and you're on fire? Right? Which is it? If you didn't have the word for burning fire, but you were in pain, would it matter that you didn't think this is burning fire? I mean, if one were to go to a hell realm, they may not call it fire. It might be pink instead of red, you know? It might be a color we've never even seen. But would you be like, oh, suppose this is a good color fire. I wouldn't even call it fire, right? Would it matter if you're going like, ah! Do you care what color it is and what you call it? Right? I mean, you know? So, not really the point. The point is the experience where you're there, right? So like that. Right. Okay, then, so then hungry ghost, please say yidak.
Yidak.
Yidak is Tibetan for hungry ghost or craving spirit. So you take the small tendency towards selfishness in the mind and you magnify it millions of times, right? And what do you get? Like this craving being that can never be satisfied. Right? So, according to scripture, they do exist. They have subtle physical bodies which we can't see, but they exist around us. You know, sort of all around us. So, you know, there aren't these realms which is like, okay, this one's under the mantle of the earth, and that one's around Pluto, and the other realm is around Saturn. Okay, it's not like that. So, it's, you know, they're all coexistent essentially. You know, just different perceptual levels of reality, right? Okay. So in the hell realms, Tibetan, please say Nyalwa.
Nyalwa.
Nyalwa is Tibetan for the hell realm. So the idea of the hell realm is they last infinitely long. Life in hell realm lasts an infinitely long time because time is relative and time slows down, according to Buddhism. So, like one day in hell realm would be equivalent to thousands of years. So it's like you're having a good, you know, a good date or a good time, you know, and the time flies by. You know, you got a lousy headache and you're at work and the day drags on. Time is relative, same principle. So in the hell realms, time relativistically is extremely slow. And so life in a hell realm lasts a very, very long time in that regard. And so in the Christian sense, they say you go to hell forever. Buddhism would say it's a really, really, really long time. Maybe it's just semantics. You know? So, in the lowest level of hell, there's pure pain. There's no other sensation except intense pain. So, okay, so the next type of suffering he talks about is the suffering of change. It's the second kind of pain. And this comes under the attachment to the three realms, right? We'll mix up the three realms and the three lower realms. Right? So, three realms are desire realm, formless realm, right? So the lower realms are in the desire realm. In the desire realm, you have as you go down, the humans with animals, creating spirits and hell realms, right? So when we live in the desire realm. So the suffering of change, nothing stays the same. Nothing is dependable, nothing is consistent, right? No relationship stays the same. No matter how good things are, they always change, right? They always fluctuate. Great things change into neutral things, or boring things, or terrible things. People change, you know. I mean, you can have something that you're really hoping for, you're really wanting, whether it's those beautiful shoes, or the big score on the job, or the salary, or the relationship, or the house, or whatever it is. And, and you get it, hopefully. And then, 3 months later, it's very interesting. You want more, you want different, or whatever it might be. It doesn't make you happy after a while. So, why do humans have this? It's implicit in our realm. This is suffering of change. It's not possible to exist in this realm without experiencing the suffering of change. It's not that I'm a bad person or you're a bad person or somehow like your mind is different than anybody else's mind. It's not like Hector's mind is defective and everybody else's mind is great. Okay? We're on the same boat. It doesn't matter what we get. We're not satisfied for long. Whatever it is, it wears off in short order and we want something else. Channel surfing. So like, channel surfing is human existence amplified at its worst, right? So you can't avoid it in this realm. Ultimately, nothing makes us happy in this realm. It doesn't matter what we get; it doesn't last. I mean, it brings some pleasure, brings some satisfaction, brings some woohoos, perhaps, but it's not lasting. It wears off and it changes and fluctuates, right? So impossible to avoid it in this realm. So, you have all these. All of humanity, how many billions of people get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they get showered, and they get dressed, and they go to work to get stuff. And the sad thing is even if everybody gets what they want, it's not going to ever happen. Not for long. It's going to wear off, and it'll just be the same thing over and over and over again. So, going through the whole day struggling to get something, that won't bring happiness to some people. It's like a curse, a curse of humanity. So this is the suffering of change. And it's our own mind. Our own mind causes us to lose interest or dislike it or be turned off in a short period of time. The outer thing didn't change. The salary didn't change. You're still making that same six-figure salary, but it isn't quite doing it anymore. The expenses have gone up. I feel like I need more or deserve more or whatever the case might be, right? So can't we just learn to be satisfied? No. In fact, we can't. Maybe that's some relief, I don't know. But that was the facts of human existence, right? So it's karma shifting. If karma were stable and karma never shifted, you could get something that was wonderful and always happen. But karma wears out and karma shifts. So you pretend to be happy all you want. A lot of people come to spiritual traditions and they practice pretending to be happy, right? You may have, I used to encounter it in the early days quite a lot. I'm Buddhist. Hi. We work at a Dharma center. We live in a Dharma center. Isn't all this wonderful? And then they go get drunk in the evening or something. It's like, so it's the nature of the mind. It's the nature of karma. It's no fun to be in this realm. It's no fun to stay in this realm. And it's only by living in accordance with the laws of karma and emptiness that we can get out of this realm and get out of the misery, right? So keeping our vows, understanding ethics, karma, and emptiness is the way to stop the dissatisfaction, stop the suffering, get out of the suffering realm. So,
What about the mantra, "Oh, I have enough"? Will that help us?
I have enough?
Will that help us to get out of this realm?
You elaborate?
Well, you're saying there's nothing we can do.
I didn't say that.
Well,
I said
you're
there's
saying
lots you could do.
okay. Okay.
I said there's nothing you could buy.
Oh.
Nothing you can shop for.
Okay.
Nothing you can get. It's gonna do it. Right? There's no date you're gonna go on that's gonna ultimately do it. There's no shopping trip that's gonna ultimately do it. There's no meal that's ultimately gonna do it. There's no sex that's ultimately going to do it. There's no friend that's ultimately going to do it.
You're saying as a human.
Did I do anything?
Words. Words.
Real estate.
Real estate, a property.
It's opening day.
How long does that last?
Until we lose this account.
Yeah. It was good for a while,
Right
right?
now. Today I'm happy. It's opening day.
I mean, the reason our body's getting old is because karma's wearing out, right? The karma's wearing out. If we had collected the karma and had a lovely, beautiful, strong, healthy human body, and that karma was stable, it wouldn't change, right? We continue to have that. But those karmas wear out. Right? Those karmas, the energy of those karmas are depleted and they wear out. So, and it's not that there's some outer self-existent body that's going on. Perceptions are changing. Perceptions are changing, right? Reality. And that is our reality. So, most of the karma we collect is what's called dirty good karma. It's polluted with ignorance. We think of things as self-existent, like I'm going to go help someone because I see that they're self-existently hungry, and feeding them is a good thing. But it's not imbued with wisdom. There isn't the element of understanding what's really going on. There isn't the thought process that says, I'm having a perceptual experience of a blank screen. It's manifesting this way because of my past deeds, etc., etc. I'm going to go and engage in virtue and generate virtue and generate goodness for the sake of creating that reality in the future. If you're thinking that way, you collect much cleaner karma. It's not so much dirty karma, right? But to the extent we're just going and doing self-existent virtue, we're collecting dirty good karma, which then just brings a sort of what you would call a dirty good result, which wears out. I get a nice meal, I get a nice experience, and then it fades and the karma wears out. So understanding emptiness, that's the difference. The perfection of wisdom means you understand emptiness. And, if you collect good karma with that kind of knowledge, then you can change this body, this mind, this life to enlightenment, to a physical one. And so that's our goal, that's our practice as serious Buddhists is to train ourselves to engage in life with an understanding of ultimate reality, with an understanding of the nature of emptiness and virtue and perception, so that we can say, I don't have to perceive things the way I am, reflexively and habitually. I can train myself so that I have a mind that perceives purity and virtue and is filled with purity and virtue, and therefore experiences reality as purity and virtue. And that's our goal as spiritual practitioners, right? All right. So then let's take a break here. Then we get to a line where Holy Drupa Gyaltsen speaks of mystic power, good deeds. So I think there's like 3 cookies out there. You can fight over this LOJONG practitioner.
There's some pickled papaya too.
Pickled papaya. You can fight over that.
And half a bagel.
Half a bagel. You guys are gonna have that in there. Let's see it. Nice to meet you. Thanks.